Hello, welcome to History in Lowell with me, Maritza Grooms, and my personal professor, Forrant.
I like that.
Today we have a special guest, Rogers Muyanja. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Now, Rogers, you have two stories to tell us today.
Yes.
Right? So we have you coming from
Uganda.
Uganda, excellent. So tell us about that. How has that been?
So, yeah, it's been quite a journey. I migrated to Lowell, to the United States, specifically to Lowell in October of 2009. I had just won a lottery. Which
not
is
the kind of lottery that we're thinking.
Not the cash lottery. It's actually the lottery to have the opportunity to live in the United States. So each year, the United States gives 50,000 people the opportunity to come and live in the United States. And they are able to do that through the Diversity Visa Lottery Program. So Uganda is one of the countries that benefit from this initiative. Each year, I think I looked at the numbers at the time, that was 2009, and we had slightly over 400 people who were able to receive those visas.
From Uganda?
From Uganda, specifically. So I'm one of the people who are lucky. So before that, I was a journalist. And when this opportunity came up, I thought, you know, everybody is looking forward to moving to the United States because it's a land of opportunities. So I first played the lottery in 2006. I didn't get
Playing the lottery. you got it.
Yeah. And then I tried my second shot in 2007 because it's played every year around September into the late October. So, and currently it's going on. So when I tried, the process takes 2 years. The first year, once you play it, they get back to you a year later to let you know, to notify you if you've been among the 100,000 who are considered. But out of the 100,000, they are supposed to select 50,000. So I was among the 100,000. Then the second year, that was 2000, so they get back to me at first in 2008, August. Then they get back to me in 2009, letting me know that I'd received my visa and I should go ahead and process it.
Wow.
So the diversity lottery is set up different from the quote-unquote normal way that immigrants can apply at an embassy, like from England or France or Germany or whatever. And so it sets aside specific numbers of slots for people coming from countries that don't ordinarily send significant numbers of immigrants in. And so it's a way, that's why it's called a lottery, it's a way to take a chance that maybe from a country that's been less involved in immigration to the United States to at least be able to get people. So you basically have to go to the embassy the same way, right? And get put on a list.
Yes.
Wow.
But it's much more, the U.S. immigration laws are very convoluted. I mean, there's a lot of loopholes, right? If you're a baseball player and you can hit a baseball really far, you can come in from the Dominican Republic and work right away because you hit. So if you have skills that nobody else has, you can jump the line.
Yes.
So if you're an opera singer and the New York Opera needs an opera singer, and then right. So it's there's many ways, but this is really a really interesting one. And again, it's sort of. It really is a lottery in the way the way you're talking about it.
Yes, because actually, many people wait and they are not considered. So one thing I've noticed working with the International Institute, which is an organization that welcomes refugees, is that they are kind of the same systems, or the criteria is the same with the processing, except that some with the refugee processing, it's a little longer. With the diversity visa program, it's approximately 2 years. So once you are considered, they notify you, then you go for medical checks. Once you are done with the medical checks, then you'll go. So what they do is they send you to this specific area. We went to the International Migration Organization, which was in Kenya, because I did my processing in Kenya, which is a neighboring country on the east of Uganda. So when after that, they gave me 2 envelopes. One, you're supposed to present it to the embassy, and you're not supposed to open it. The other one, you still are not supposed to open it, which you come with to the United States and hand it to a medical profession you get in contact with, the immediate the medical person you get in contact with. So that is basically to assess your health status. If there are any complications, they are able to know and all that. So once I came to the United States, I ended up settling in Lowell. And in part, it's because my brother had moved into Lowell and was living on Butterfield Street. So that's how I ended up in Lowell. For him, he ended up in Lowell because he didn't know anyone, but when he got to the airport, he knew a friend who lived in California, and he had no idea how far California was from Lowell. So he calls this guy and he's like, you know what, I'm at the airport. Which airport? Boston. Could you come and get me? And he's like, no, I'm in San Jose in California. And so he says, oh, no, it's okay, I'll wait for you. Only to, so he tells him, no, actually it would take me a lot of time to get to you, but I know a friend who lives in Massachusetts, and by coincidence, the friend lived in Lowell. So he tells him, figure out a way of getting back to the arrival point at the airport, and I'll ask him to come and get you. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So once I moved here, there have been a lot of challenges as an immigrant. In part, it's because there are a lot of differences culturally. There are a lot of differences when it comes to the professional aspects. When it comes, because I was a journalist in Uganda. I'd been for over, because I'd started in 2001 as a freelance reporter just after my high school. I went to law school as a reporter and then started working, and then I did some training with the BBC because I reported on post-conflict northern Uganda. So when I came here, I was eager to join the media, you know, hoping that, you know, I'm now in the US, probably the media in the US is going to be a little different and more, you know, an interesting area. But that didn't work out. So I've had to navigate. It's been challenging. So there are a lot of people who come with qualifications, with experiences, and that is what I've noticed. And because there may be services, but they may not be able to understand which entities, which organizations do exist to offer these services. Some of them end up starting afresh, like I had to do. So I had to start afresh. I went to Middlesex, started with my associates, went to UMass Lowell, where I pursued my bachelor's and master's, and eventually ended up at the International Institute of New England. I had the opportunity to intern there, and then I realized there were people who were just exactly like me, and that's how I ended up staying. And I was like, yeah, this is the place.
When you went back to school, what did you study?
So at Middlesex, I studied liberal arts and sciences. My associates was liberal arts and sciences. Then I went to UMass. I'd been fascinated by the peace and conflict studies program. Because when I worked as a journalist in Uganda, I partly did some work for the International Center for Transitional Justice. They introduced me to the concept of peace and conflict. So, which had a partnership with the BBC World Service Trust. So some of the reports we compiled would be aired on BBC. So when I came here, it was an area I was very curious to get into. So I pursued my bachelor's in peace and conflict studies and went on to pursue my master's in peace and conflict studies, but my concentration was in policy analysis, just to understand how policies work.
It's, I mean, what's fascinating listening to the story is thinking back over the history that we've done, right? All for the many shows, sort of the ways in which people end up finding their way here, right? And it's sort of like 6 degrees of separation of Lowell. So, you know, here's your brother in a train station calling somebody in San Jose who says, well, I know somebody in Lowell, right? And then roundabout, then, you know, you end up through your brother in Lowell. And it's the stories are always interesting, again, as a historian, trying to figure out like how people move around and where they end up. But also, we've talked a lot about how people end up coming to Lowell, or if somehow they land someplace else first, but they end up here. One of the powerful, significant institutions in the city is education. And that time after time we've talked about, in one way or another, high school, Middlesex, UMass Lowell, this sort of triple threat of sort of navigating your way and then ending up, you know, with, in your case, well, you have a Middlesex degree and you have 2 UML degrees, right? And so Lowell also represents that really unique opportunity for people, irrespective of where they come from in the world. And so I think that's, I mean, again, I have to keep being, sometimes when I'm pessimistic, I have to keep being reminded of sort of the ways in which the city works.
Right. I was thinking the same, like, how I was thinking pessimistically at first, like, how terrible, you've done all of this work, you have all this experience, and then you come here and have to start from the beginning.
From the beginning,
but how wonderful, because of the opportunities here, that you were able to start from the beginning and just go right on through to your master's.
Exactly.
I don't even have my master's.
But we have talked about the peace and conflict program at UMass Lowell, you and I off camera. So there you go. There's another person that can persuade you.
I'm joining the team.
That's the case. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you do at the Institute, since you sort of teased it a little bit and said a lot of people that you work with now sort of here I am asking questions. Look at this. Come from you know, similar kinds of storylines that you had. So what's that work like for you?
So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the International Institute. The International Institute is an organization that has welcomed refugees and immigrants to Lowell, the city of Lowell. Actually, it started as the International Institute of Lowell in 1918 on John Street here in Lowell. And so we've been here 100 years, and we'll be celebrating our centennial in the spring of 2019, most likely May. So it welcomes refugees, and recently we started to expand our services to a larger community. So we are going to expand by 50%. That means we are expecting to see over 2,500 clients get into our doorway. So what I do is I am the community relations manager for the International Institute of New England here in Lowell. My role is to make sure I share the message of the International Institute with the community members. I engage people who are interested in supporting our work and making sure we figure out how that can be possible, which includes corporate organizations, community organizations, individuals. So that is part of the work I do. I'm also trying to be part of, I'm also a part of the team that is trying to organize the centennial celebration. We shall have a party in 2019, and we will be welcoming everyone from the Greater Lowell region. And we ask everyone to go onto our website, which is iine.org, and nominate the people they know. We are looking for trailblazers, people who have supported refugees and immigrants in the community of Lowell. We want to see immigrants on the list among their hundreds. We want to see even Americans who have supported this work. We want to make sure that all demographics within the community of Lowell are recognized, because Lowell is a port filled with different people from different backgrounds. We want to make sure that that is represented in the room when we celebrate this event.
That's beautiful.
One of the interesting things about the Institute is a few years ago, I was asked by people at the Institute to help them think about a fundraising event, and could I help them look at their history in Lowell. And it turned out, unbeknownst to me, but now I like these records a lot, they had a complete history of the work of the Institute in Lowell from its inception. Boxes and boxes and boxes of records and files and meeting minutes and lists of people who had gone through citizenship classes, even like the curriculum books they used when people came from Lithuania or Poland or wherever to teach them English. It's all in boxes in the Center for Lowell History, and so I
sounds
worked
like a
with it a little.
Victorian
It is.
Oh no, yeah, it's like you cannot. I mean, I'm like a kid at Christmas. Like, it's like, oh my God, you know. And so I've been working off and on with students in it. And this past summer, an intern from the University of Vermont worked really extensively on the records again. And so I'm going to be working with the Institute on the 100-year history part of the event to create some kind of an exhibit. Details still being worked out, but the record keeping they kept is second to none. I mean, they even have, which are sort of off limits to researchers and should be because they're individual cases, but they have an individual case file for every person they worked with.
Yeah.
That is
going back to 1917.
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
It's when I saw it, it was like, you have to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me. I mean, it's just really brilliant. And so so you really do get the sense of Lowell as this port that's only, as you described it, right, as so many people are coming through. One of my favorite things in the boxes is cookbooks. One of the ways they raised money is to have these international cookbooks. So at any given moment, like 1925, all the newcomers who had come in over the past few years, each would be encouraged to give a recipe, and then they would put like the world cooks. And they would put a cookbook with recipes from Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Italy, Greece, Portugal, whatever. And then periodically they would do another one.
Wow.
And then they would use them around Christmas time. They would sell them as gifts, and then they would raise money to do more of the work of the Institute, citizenship classes and things like that. And so, again, just looking at those is just a great, again, a reflection back on like the role of food and sort of these different recipes from different people. And I mean, it really is like someday we should take the camera to the Center for Lowell History where the records are and like just like film the boxes.
Yeah.
And pull things out and say, look at this. Because it really is. It's a treasure for people that care about this kind of history.
I feel like I could spend hours there.
Absolutely.
Oh, I have.
So actually, Bob has mentioned some of the things. What's fascinating is that the work that the International Institute of Law started with is exactly the work we are doing. Although I can say there are some sophisticated situations now, but they, when leaders at the time were trying to, figure out what the immigration situation should be, some were opposed to the situation, some were for it. The community members, a group of women in Lowell, decided to come together, and they're like, okay, you know what? We are going to support immigrants. We are going to make sure when they come in, they're able to settle in, they're able to find jobs, they're able to start families with the support of community members, which is exactly what we are still doing. When people come in, we pick them up from the airport, get them into their apartment, which is already set up, share with them the first meal, get their kids into schools, get them enrolled in health services, help them get their social security so they can get employment and eventually get them jobs, their first job. And the support is ongoing through, within the employment department, somebody has up to 5 years through which they can still come back. If somebody gets a job, it doesn't mean the end of it all. If they're interested in upgrading from whichever job they are at, they can come back. There is training that is offered. So people get well-paying jobs so they can become self-sufficient, which is our ultimate goal. So the same work that the Institute used to do so many years ago is the same work we are still doing. And it's interesting how when I look at the timeline, which Bob is actually working on, and it would be great for everyone to come and see what actually has transpired. You see different groups of people resettling in Lowell. You see phases, and this, so most of the immigrant communities in Lowell have been impacted by the International Institute. Recently, I met a gentleman whose mother is now 102 years old, and they were assisted by the International Institute. He told me, and I spoke to the mother. The mother by then was a child, and their father had passed on. He was working in the mills. He got kind of hurt and he passed on. And they came under the care of the International Institute. 6 kids, They were. And today, she would want to come and share her story. And to me, that's fascinating. From the 1920s to currently, it's incredible.
Where is that family from?
So they were from Greece. Right now, they live in Chelmsford. Actually, the son I spoke to is a TV host for Chelmsford Community TV. Where we
Wow. So we'll have to make some connections.
Absolutely.
I mean, the other thing that's interesting in the work that was done with the records this summer is how much at inception and for a lot of the years, the leadership roles and the sort of impetus for creating the organization came from women in Lowell. And it's also sort of a missing part of the role of women that sort of gets dropped out of history. And so the Institute at its inception is a function of the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association in Lowell. And for several years, it's sort of housed within and as part of, and then later in the late 1920s, maybe early 1930s, right around that time period, then it becomes its own separate entity. But all along, when you look at the records and you look at the names of the staff and the executive directors of the organization and what have you, it's almost exclusively a women-run organization, which is important, I think, again, in telling the story. And it's made me try to figure out why. Yeah. I just find it really, I just find it really interesting that that was the case, and in many respects, it's sort of stayed that way. I mean, one of the longest running executive directors was a second generation woman, Deolindo Mello, whose parents came from Portugal. Wow. And she started out working at the Institute doing translation and English classes for Portuguese immigrants and things like that. Went to Lowell Teachers College at the time, and then ultimately started working on staff and then became executive director. And she actually worked there for decades, all in all. And it again is like one of these women that we should know more about in Lowell for this role that she played. And she probably knew this 102-year-old woman that you're speaking of, because she, you know, back then she would have been working there, or maybe she was the executive director. So the interconnections, I'd love to be able to make like a spider web kind of a thing, sort of 6 degrees of the International Institute.
I bet that would be so interesting.
Oh, I think so.
Like who it connects to now, who's working in the community now. Oh.
Yeah, whose grandma came through the Institute and now is, you know, like working as a vice president at Enterprise Bank.
Yes.
Whatever, right? We would find that if we started digging. We would find that.
Well, maybe I should get on that. That could be my research project.
Hey.
Get in touch with Professor Forrant. Yeah, because he's going to have a lot of information in there. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So when you both are doing this work, researching the 100 years, right, coming up, so what's something, we talked about the similarities between then and now, what's something that is different from how it looked 100 years ago to how it looks now?
That's a good question.
Or is
what's
it different?
Yeah. So I think that the differences have been on and off. I mean, the rhetorics pertinent to the immigration situation have been on and off. I think different administrations have addressed this question differently. We've seen support and we've seen withdrawal of such support from different groups that are in the administration. This time, it's extreme. I think that's what I seem to sense based on what I've seen and I've read, and we'll learn more from Professor Forrant. Because during President Obama, the numbers had been increased. We at one point had over 85,000 refugees allowed into the United States. Remember, United States signed is one of the signatories to to the agreement that countries commit to resettle refugees. So when this administration came into office, we see a decline. At first, they put the number to 45,000, and of course, the resettlement process saw lesser than that. And recently, they put it to 30,000. So these changes, it's at at the lowest in history. So we see that. I think that is a difference, one of the differences we are seeing. But also the conversations, and I think that we've thought that this would be a great time to start the conversation. You know, to remind people that, you know what, the immigrants have been here. America's story is the immigrant story. So I think that having the opportunity to start speaking about the work we do, for example, in Lowell, we've been here 100 years, but because we've been working, you know, and not like speaking about the work we do, we realize that with the current events that are going on, it's important for us to come out and say, hey, look, we've been here 100 years, we've resettled. Actually, some of the people who are part of these conversations in a positive way or negative way have been immigrants. They are part of this story. So it's important for us to make sure that we highlight that. And I think that the event, the centennial, is going to make sure we underline that and make sure that this conversation is broadened, that everyone learns about what the realistic story on immigration and refugees is.
I think that is a really powerful plea and call to action, right, for people, for folks to really learn your history.
Yes, please.
We have a really great resource right here in our community.
Yes.
And the International Institute has done such amazing work here in Lowell, and for 100 years.
100
which
years.
is exciting. And I think that there's another call to action for the nominations, right? We
Yes.
want to make sure that folks know. Get those nominations out. If you know an immigrant, refugee, or those who are maybe first generation, trailblazers, those who are making a difference in our community.
It could be, actually, it could also be somebody, if they know of somebody who may not necessarily be part of this, but who has significantly worked hard to make sure that the support is there for these communities. These people should deserve the recognition. All you have to do is just go onto our website. I will say that again. It's iine.org/100. There is a nomination form with the criteria for the nomination. So please feel free to do that. We want to make sure that all demographics within our community are recognized. We are trying to get a list of 100 people from Lowell, the greater community. Somebody could be a resident of Lowell or somebody who is in one way or another connected to Lowell.
Excellent. So thank you, Rogers,
thank
for
you so
coming
much.
in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for doing this work, of course. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in to History in Lowell.